All right. Well, we have our very first special guest on the Wisdom of Walt podcast. He's been a friend of mine now for several years. Kristin's just now meeting him. Everybody, Lee Kitchen is in the house. Welcome, Lee.
Hey, how's it going? Yeah, we already made a connection because he's wearing the Mouse One shirt, and I was telling her that I was lucky enough to be there when they landed it for the last time on World Drive. It was like the coolest thing I've ever seen in
Wow.
my life, and
That is
I
very
never got to go
cool.
on it, but I got to be there when that happened, so that was pretty awesome.
That's very cool. Well, you're here today because you were at Walt Disney World 40 years ago this week
Yep.
when something else, not necessarily really cool, but definitely memorable happened. And it's
Yeah.
what my Wednesdays with Walt article is all about this week. And I don't want to steal your thunder. So tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do,
Okay.
and what you were doing 40 years ago this weekly.
Excellent. So my name is Lee Kitchen. Of course, I am an innovation catalyst. I help companies come up with big ideas, and I got that that talent by working 32 years at Walt Disney World. I started in 1985. I was only 5 years old. Huh, get it? No. I started
32
in
years,
19,
everyone.
I started in 1985. I hadn't gone to college. I had just freshly graduated high school, turned 18, loaded up my truck, and moved from San Francisco, California, all the way out to Orlando, and fulfilled my lifelong dream. Like you, Jeff, I dreamt of, I read about Walt Disney. I read about Epcot, and I had to be a part of it. So I started my job on June 27th, 1985, and then in January of 1986, for a couple things. One is it actually was snowing in Florida that year. So I
Hmm.
have pictures of the few flakes on my windshield because it definitely got below freezing, and I wasn't really used to that. But I actually started in Future World attractions. So at the time, Future World was divided into, or Epcot was divided into Future World and World Showcase, which Future
Right.
World, of course, had different topics that they explored. Spaceship Earth was communication. The land was all about harvesting and land and food that we eat, and journey into imagination, all that kind of stuff. And one of my first jobs, besides being at the Land Pavilion, I actually started at the Kitchen Cabaret, which they thought would be funny because my name was Lee Kitchen. They put me at the Kitchen Cabaret. I
I
mean,
love that
I can re-
so very much.
I can recite the whole thing if you want me to. But my second job was I was trained in Communicore, and not at the cool FutureCom Communicore that was over on the west side, which was where you got to talk to guests on the big screen, almost like the World Key information system, which I was going to be trained there a couple years later. But I was trained at Backstage Magic, which, if you remember, it was a little attraction with a little robot called Smart One, and it was a preview of the basically the Epcot central computer area where all the rides and attractions were controlled. And being trained there was another attraction towards the south side of Communicore East, which was called the Electronic Forum. Have you ever, or had you ever seen the Electronic Forum before, Jeff?
This was
I haven't.
before I ever got to Epcot.
Super interesting. So Electronic Forum was like this cool looking, back in the 80s, everything was like cool, futuristic, Star Trek looking stuff, right? And
Heck
Which, by
yeah.
the
it
way,
was,
stop for a second. You grew up in the Bay Area and moved to Florida. I grew up in Florida and moved to the Bay Area. So we're like literally
yeah,
crisscrossing the country at the exact same time.
absolutely. So I worked at the Electronic Forum, and the cool part about Electronic Forum is that it was a really great costume. You got to dress in gray slacks and a striped tie and a red jacket. And of course, it was all polyester. But you still look cool, and you looked like you were in charge of something, right? But basically, it was kind of like a news hub. There was a lot of screens, and people could pick up these little telephones and listen to the news that was going on. And we ran this thing called the Epcot poll, it was kind of silly. It was like asking about, what you like on your hamburger or something like that. It wasn't like this life impacting kind of stuff, but it was still fun to run, and you had to keep the straight face while you were doing it. And I loved working that attraction because you were on your own. You didn't have to bump in and out of rotation. Somebody would come and send you to lunch, and then you come back and run the next show, and it was a nice place to work. So in 1986, and what was the date, Jeff? Remind me of the date on January.
January 28th.
Yeah, so January 28th, I remember coming into work that morning, and it was super cold. I got to wear a trench coat because that's what matched that stuff. So I felt super cool, like I had my trench coat, and I actually I did my first Epcot poll, which is a show, which is that show I was telling you about, and then somebody came to break me, and I went to break, and when I came back, everybody when I came back, when you come from the break room, you have to walk in between the what they call the breezeway between the North Communicore and South Communicore, which is right now where the shop is and the Starbucks is right there. And we were all looking towards Horizons, and then I had forgotten, wow, the space shuttle is taking off today. And I'm going to tell you a little bit of backstory, but I felt particularly connected to this. I had heard about the fact that it was launching, and I had to see it, but I had forgotten that morning for some reason. No one had talked about it, and I had forgotten about it. But lucky for me, I was right there when it started to launch, right?
Yeah, and a lot of people may not realize you can see launches
absolutely
at Cape Canaveral from Walt Disney World.
Yeah, and what's cool about it is that later on they would replace Horizons, which wasn't cool. I love it; it's my favorite attractions. But when they replaced it with Mission Space, it was exactly perfect to watch all the rocket launches from right there. Right?
Oh, interesting.
But I had an emotional connection to the Challenger because one of the first cool things I got to do on my own that my parents actually let me do. I couldn't believe they let me do it, but one of my best friends' dads was a United Airlines pilot, and he also owned a Cessna, and we got to fly down to Edwards Air Force Base and watch the Challenger land. And it was I'd never been to anything like that before.
Wow.
And it was so cool, but it was it was one of those things where you wait like 4 hours for 3 minutes of hoopla, but it was still one of the coolest things. So I felt like connected because, hey, I'd been by this ship before, right? I felt super cool. So
wow.
So I walk out. I'm walking back after my break, which was in the Epcot tunnel, by the way. A lot of people don't know Epcot has tunnels. And I look up, and you could see it. It was a really clear day. You could see it bright as day. And then all of a sudden, it was like it didn't look right. I mean, if you remember correctly, the smoke was going in different directions, and I was like, and people were speculating. And I heard somebody say something happened, and I was like, well, I better go back to where the news is because that's where I'm going to find out. So when I went back, the electronic forum was crowded with like 100 people. Like it really only accommodated like 20 to 25 people. And everybody had gone there because of the news and because of the stuff. And when I got there, they expected me to be some kind of authority because I had the suit on. And I was like,
oh, gotcha.
I just watched this. I had no idea what had happened. I was just watching it with everybody else. And what we did was I was close to one of the maintenance guys. And I said, hey, everybody's really interested in this. And he went and turned the main news station on the big screen in the theater. So we just we canceled the shows for the next couple hours, and we opened the theater so people could actually watch the news as it transpired. So it was just an interesting thing that I barely worked that attraction, which was ironic that morning. And also ironic that why did I forget about it? I can't tell you how many times I've gone to the airport in Florida in the morning and looked up to see a trail going, darn it, I missed another one, So, like, I now put this stuff on my schedule, but somehow it fell off. But I love, like, to me, rocket launches and shuttle launches they're still the coolest thing in the world. And it cracks me up that so many people take it for granted because it just happens all the time, but it's still, we're going to space. It's so cool, right?
Yeah, it's crazy.
So that stuff never gets old to me. That was just a great day. I was lucky enough later on in life when I was in marketing, my boss took us all to watch STS 132, which is the second to last shuttle launch, I believe. And it was one, and we watched it from the famous media place with the countdown clock and the whole deal, and it was one of the coolest experiences. I regret that a little bit because I decided to bring my camera and I took pictures instead. Should have just watched it. You know what I'm saying? Like, I got lucky enough to go back for STS 134 as well, which is low cloud, so you can get to see much. But I decided not to take pictures in. But yeah, the shuttle program was always a big deal for me. My brother and I watched the very first Columbia launch. What was it, 1981, 82?
1981.
Like
I was a senior in high school, and I can remember them bringing us into the auditorium right before graduation. It was like April of that year, and having us all watch it together. And I grew up on an Air Force base in the Panhandle of Florida, and I can remember. I'm pretty sure the ship was called Discovery, which was a prototype for the shuttle. And Eglin's a test base, and they had this like giant climate hangar.
Was that the Enterprise? Was the Enterprise the?
Or maybe it was the Enterprise.
Yeah,
it might have been the Enterprise.
Never actually went to space. but
It
it
was the
was
Enterprise.
inspired by
Boy,
the Enterprise.
yep,
Yeah.
yep. So I can remember going out to the runway and seeing the Enterprise, which again never went into space, but it was used as a prototype for all sorts of
Yeah.
testing and what have you. So, it's hard to believe that this week it's been 40 years, right?
It's
Yeah.
really
And
hard. Yeah.
people who were around and, unlike Kristen, old enough to remember, knows exactly where they were
Yep.
when the Challenger tragically exploded. But not everybody can say that they were at Walt Disney World, let alone Epcot, which was always forward and future thinking, right?
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, and let
And
alone at the news hub. Like I was at the news hub of Epcot,
yeah,
so I
yeah,
became the most popular attraction that day, which is so funny because no one stayed in Communicore because everybody wanted to go to the attractions. But that day, like it was
You
so
were the
crowded.
man that day.
Yeah, it was, and I didn't take breaks after that. I worked the rest of my shift, and I think I worked a little overtime because there was just so many people to manage and talk about. And then I ended up getting the highlights. So when people came and asked what happened, I was like, "Here's what happened, this, that, and that." You
yeah,
can go watch the news in the theater. But yeah, it was just so interesting. And again, it was also cold. I still had my trench coat
yeah.
on. I felt super cool. But whatever.
Lee, I got a quick question for you. So I can only imagine witnessing something like that, right? Live as it's happening, but then immediately being flooded by so many people. But then you have to kind of you're put into a role of leadership,
Yeah.
and you've got to be clear headed. I can't imagine like the delay of emotion maybe that maybe came after that. Like once you realized the gravity of the situation,
Yeah.
how many hundreds and hundreds and thousands of students were watching it live.
Yeah.
Being a teacher myself, the fact that we lost a teacher on board.
Christine McAuliffe, man.
Yeah.
She should be tributed. Like the
One
first,
out of
the first person.
11,000 that were picked. Yeah, like
Yeah.
so. I'm just curious. Like,
Wasn't
is
she
that a
the
true
first
statement?
civilian in general to be in space? I mean, wasn't she
Yes,
one of the first? Yeah. So
she was.
she had a lot of monikers, and it's
Right.
it's tragic, but her legacy probably inspired a whole lot of people to become scientists and to become astronauts and
Indeed.
things like that.
Yeah.
So and
Well,
teachers and all that stuff.
well, and
Right.
here's what's crazy. It was just 3 years earlier that we had our first woman in space,
Mm.
Sally Ride.
Mm-hmm.
And ironically enough, she was asked, what was the launch like? And her response famously was, "Have you ever been to Disneyland? That was an e-ticket."
Yeah.
And I love that analogy, and I love
That's
that her
great.
last name was right. And she would come back and play a major role. There's a great documentary, I believe on Netflix, about the Challenger disaster, and she would
Mm.
play a pivotal role in putting the pieces back together and trying to figure out what the heck happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
It was.
you know,
I mean, the story is tragic too. Like the story of it
they
bums me
knew.
out
Well,
because
it's
they knew
preventable.
it
All
was an
of it could have been
O-ring.
prevented.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. But I mean, if you look back at a lot of those decisions that a lot of people higher up made, and they were up against stuff that we might have known about, but they still put a lot of people in danger, and that's what happens. Like
Right.
it's just that part is a bummer to me. But we live and learn. I hope they don't do it anymore. I hope when they see
Right.
those signs, and
Yeah.
it's funny because it's so frustrating when you after that I went out to watch regular rocket launches after the shuttle program was scrapped, and how many times did I drive out to Port Canaveral only for it to get scrubbed like 5 minutes beforehand? And
Right.
Right.
in my mind, as frustrated as you want to be, I'm like,
Right.
hey, you just saved a bunch of people's lives. You know what I'm saying? Like,
Right.
I'm selfish because I drove an hour and a half out to being all upset, but I shouldn't be upset because you just made a good decision that not letting that rocket go off.
And
in
maybe
this-
we
in
can
this stuff.
take that kind of empathy and forgiveness next time we're in those 3-hour lines, for attractions. Like, and it breaks down
Right.
right when you're getting ready to board, and you're like, well, maybe a life was saved today.
Safety first,
Hey,
right?
Right?
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So one of the tiebacks to all of this that I love that people either might not know or have forgotten is how important Walt Disney and Disneyland played to NASA and the moon landing in 1969. So, for example, when the Disneyland program came out, which was really a giant infomercial for building the park,
Yep.
the episodes were built around the different lands, and they didn't know what they were going to do with Tomorrowland, which meant
Right.
they didn't know what they were going to do with the Tomorrowland episodes. And they brought in the German rocket scientist who was now in the United States, Werner von Braun, And, he talked about some of the different options on what it would look like for going to the moon. And that episode was so impressive that the Eisenhower White House called the Disney studio the morning after it aired and said the president needs a copy of that episode for his generals at the Pentagon.
I love
Wow.
it.
And that gave birth to NASA.
Yeah.
And the popularity of those episodes, the popularity of Tomorrowland, NASA would go on to credit Walt Disney for helping to make the moon landing possible 3 years after Walt Disney's death. And one of my favorite pictures is, I believe it's CBS, about 4 minutes before Apollo 11 lands on the moon in July of 1969.
Mm-hmm.
They're showing people gathered all around the world, right? And that includes people gathered in Tomorrowland, at Disneyland, in Anaheim, California, looking at the landing that's about to take place,
What a
and
full
it's just
circle moment.
so it's just a full circle moment. And to me, Future World and Epcot has always been a Tomorrowland on steroids.
Absolutely. Like it took its inspiration from that to begin with. But you reminded me of something, Jeff, and I want to say it before I forget about it. And that's one of the things you taught me is the whole courage thing and not giving up and not resting on your laurels and all that kind of stuff, which is stuff directly from Walt Disney. And one of the things that I teach in creativity is the same thing. And I ask people not to judge the process. I ask people to trust the process because you never know where it's going to come from. And I think I say this because I think about, I was a huge Star Trek Next Generation fan, and when you go to Star Trek conventions, people will stand up and they'll say, hey, whatever the actress's name who played Dr. Beverly Crusher, you inspired me to become an astronaut or to become a nurse. So, like, whatever creative thing that you're doing might not have the direct impact that you want to have, but it might have this other impact that leads to something really great, right? And how did Tomorrowland and Future World inspire those people? And I'll tell you, one guy that I also had on tour at Disney, he was actually, I don't know if he still holds the record, but he was he spent the most time on the International Space Station. His name was Mike Fink. And Mike Fink talked about a time when he came to Epcot as a younger person and how he was so inspired. He was already on the roll to be a jet pilot and things like that, but he was so inspired. He's like, that like clinched the deal. He knew he had to go forward, and I was so cool. I don't know, Jeff, if you remember, but my boss at the time, a guy named Duncan Wardle, great guy, he decided to do this great PR event where he was going to send Buzz Lightyear into space, which he did. Yeah. And boy, talk about getting a bunch of red tape for that. I mean, he got through that. He's called NASA directly and everything. He'll tell you the story. It's a great story. But when Buzz Lightyear came back from space is when I hosted Mike Fink, and we had a little parade for him, and he rode around in the little RC car that's from Toy Story. It was really cute.
Oh, I love
it. Listening to Mike Fink talk, because we had a Q&A, but it was just so amazing listening to Mike Fink about how he was inspired by things like this. And which is why as an Epcot employee, that time we were talking about, I made like $7.86 an hour, right? But I didn't know who I might have been inspiring. So he could have been one of the people that came by and asked me a question, and I said something, and all of a sudden he's an astronaut. Which is why I tell people, don't get down on what you do. You don't know what the ripple effect is from that one thing that you do could possibly be.
Absolutely.
In creativity, you have to keep going, and because you don't know. The next little silly idea could result in something really, really great. So that's just a point I wanted to bring up because I love.
That's amazing.
When I worked there, I loved inspiring people in general. I was inspiring people off of all the Imagineers' work, but I was the face. I was the face of that work, So
yep.
I enjoyed it.
And I want you to give us a little summation on what you do. But before we go there. This really ties into what Kristin wrote about this week, and that is the original source of the inspiration, which, of course, is Walt and Disneyland. And Kristin, you wrote about the amazing documentary that is available now on Disney Plus and YouTube. You don't have to be a Disney Plus subscriber to enjoy Disneyland handcrafted. And
I've heard about that. I haven't watched it yet. I can't wait.
Oh my God, Lee! If that story doesn't inspire you,
I can't wait.
to go to infinity and beyond, I don't know what will. So,
Then you're
Kristin,
broken,
bring us
I
up
agree.
to speed on your thoughts on the documentary, and then Lee, we'll let you close it out by telling us where we can find you and what you're up to these days.
Awesome.
Yeah, so the documentary, hands down, can't say enough. I usually, when I watch a documentary or I find new information, I spend a lot of my time saying to myself, yeah, I've heard it. Yeah, I kind of know that. Give me something I haven't seen yet. From start to finish, this documentary was flooded with things that I had not seen yet. And there's a little fun fact for you. So I got to have a really neat sit down with Tim O'Day last week, and he let me in on the fact that all of the footage that they used had to be overlaid with original sound. So they didn't have sound when they pulled out these tapes, so they actually had to go into a studio and bring the sound back into it, which I thought was just such a testament to the dedication and the laborious efforts to bring this thing to life. One quick takeaway, and there were so many of them, aside from the fact that OSHA is probably like rolling on the floor asking themselves, how in the heck do we have barefoot people swinging from cranes with no, harness or
In their underwear with cigarettes in their mouths?
I know. I was like, that was the dream job. There wasn't, and this kind of ties into some of the articles we've written before and some of the other episodes we've talked about. We can get so wrapped up and anchored to fear out of having control of every little thing or knowing exactly what's going to come next and making sure that there's zero room for error, right? We want to have all the variables figured out. Bless Walt, man, he didn't have it all figured out. He didn't even learn how to read plans until into the gig. And so he always let the dream drive the work.
Absolutely.
And I think that is the biggest takeaway, is that we don't have to have the blueprints mapped out. We don't have to have all the math configurations mapped out. We just got to let the dream take the lead and then have the courage, going back to what you said, Lee, which ties into, the 4 C's that Jeff beautifully talks about. But to have the courage to follow that dream, that's where the magic happens. And we can't lose sight of that.
That's right.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And, Walt knew what he wanted. Yeah. Walt knew what he wanted, but he didn't exactly know, how he was going to get there. And, one of my big takeaways, because Lindsay and I watched it last night, is I love the title because it really is a testament to the craftsmanship and the artisan that was poured into that park from day one.
Right.
And I don't know that you see it.
Too.
Yep. I don't know that you see it any more than in the Disneyland Railroad and the Mark Twain Riverboat.
Yes.
I mean, and those are attractions that are easy to skip today because, they're not thrill rides. They're not e-tickets, even use that term anymore. But those were eighth wonders of the world. And when you watch that documentary, you can really understand why.
Right.
Absolutely. And we'll be skipping it at the Magic Kingdom of Walt Disney World. Sorry.
Yeah, let's not get started on that conversation. All right, Lee, so...
But I will tell you, back to what you were talking about. You were talking about how it doesn't have to be perfect. That is a thing that I drive in my creativity sessions all the time. And because people want to see results right as they start brainstorming. And I tell them, first of all, don't give me an hour. Give me 2 hours. Give me 4 hours. And because what happens is that you have to be a little bit silly and a little bit irreverent to get to the ideas at hour 2 and hour 3. And even the silly one that came out in hour 1, there's something in it that could work, and it sounds silly at the time, but it could work for something else later. So that's a lot of what I do, Jeff, is I rally people together. I get different kinds of groups together, and I ask them to create ideas. And we create ideas against a challenge, hopefully walking out with something they could use. But most of the time, it's team blending. It's working collaboratively together. It's thinking differently. It's my specialty. I was trained at Disney to do this about the middle of my career, and I've been doing it ever since. And it's a great place to be. And I still consider Walt Disney one of my biggest influences. And Jeff, now that you're telling me all these principles, I'm kind of redouble my efforts to be it. So thanks for the inspiration, basically.
Well, I have sat through some of your innovative sessions, and they're absolutely amazing. You're a
Thank you.
phenomenal facilitator, and I've watched people, literally do 180s in terms of the way
Yeah.
that they're thinking or the way that they're approaching some sort of creative challenge or some sort of issue or problem in their organization. So, where can folks find Lee Kitchen when they need to bring you in for innovation?
Well, I call myself the Magical Dude, so you can always go to magicaldude.com. Of course, you can go to linkedin.com/Lee Kitchen. You can always find me there. I'd love to chat again with you, Jeff. I've got so many, like you reminded me of at least 3 other stories, and I'm sure it'll be great for this podcast. So, and most of them are tour guide based. So I was lucky enough to be a plaid wearing tour guide with the what do you call
Jealous.
it? The big D
That's
pin
Jeff's
and all that kind
dream
of stuff.
right there.
That's
Careful
it.
with the keyword.
Well, I mean, Jeff out tour guide the tour guides when he took us on tour in 2024. He took us for this amazing tour of Magic Kingdom, taught me things that after
Doesn't
32 years
surprise
I had
me.
no idea about, and he continues to school me on some stuff. But
Yeah.
I have a lot of good stories around that, Jeff. So anytime you have a point to bring up, I can probably back it up with.
Yeah, we'd love to bring you back.
There you go. That'd be great. So, all right.
I want to talk
Mondays
about
on-
space more often, though. I love talking about space. It's great. I love it.
Yeah. Oh, I do. I do too. All right. Mondays on Main Street with Kristin, Wednesdays with Walt with me. And if you need some innovation and creativity, find Lee Kitchen, the magic what guy again?
Magicaldude.com.
Magicaldude.com.
Yeah.
All right.
Love
Well,
it.
that's gonna take care of us for this week. Thanks, everyone.
All right, guys, have a great week. See you real soon.
Thank you.
Bye. Awesome.